Hello, what's up guys, Medium Guy here. Welcome to the next video in the video series dedicated to Caddy, and in this video we're going to see how to manipulate the requests and also the responses headers. So we might actually need to add or remove some headers to the client's requests, or again add or remove some headers before actually sending the response back to the clients. So that's what we're going to see in this video. If you want to learn more, stick with me. So as you can see right over here, I'm in the official documentation page for the header directive in the Caddy's website. So actually by using this directive, we can follow this exact syntax right over here to actually add or remove some headers that we want to added or removed from our requests headers. So actually by using this exact directive, we can actually manipulate the headers of the request and response that will be received by the client and will be sent back to the client. And actually right over here on the reverse proxy directive on the header section, again we can actually manipulate the headers that will be sent to our backend services, and again the responses will be received by our backend services, and we can actually manipulate that response and add or remove some extra headers and then send it back to the client that initially made the requests. So using this exact syntax, we can actually add and delete and replace and all other functionalities that we can actually make use based on our use cases. Almost using the same syntax for the header section in the reverse proxy directive, we can actually add and remove and replace some headers when sending the request to the upstream servers and receiving the responses and manipulating that and sending back to the clients. So for doing this, we can actually use the header up directive to manipulate the headers when the request is being sent to the upstream servers, and with the same logic, we can use the header down directive to actually manipulate the headers of the response that is being sent back to the clients. So having all this in mind, let's move to the VS Code right over here. On the header transformer section, I've already put some configurations that I'll actually put to my GitHub repository, for which you can find the relevant link down in the description section of this video. So I'll move to the Docker Compose file right over here. You can see that I've got two services. One is the backend service that I'm using an echo server that will actually respond with whatever request that it will be receiving. It will respond with the details of the request headers and body and whatever data that it receives as a JSON back to the client. So this is a great example to demonstrate all this manipulation of the request headers. So moving down right over here, I've got the Caddy service, which I'm using the Caddy's official image, and I'm setting the restored policy in order to tell the Docker engine to actually try to bring up this Caddy container by for any reason that it might be stopped. So as a result, the Docker engine will try to always maintain my desired state. So using the environment variables, I'm actually setting the time zone inside the container that will hold my Caddy server. And down right over here, I've got the port section that I'm actually mapping my host machines port 80 and 443 to the exact same ports inside the container, and later I'll actually configure the Caddy to listen to these two exact same ports. So as a result, a client will use the host machine's IP address and will be able to communicate through these two ports with the Caddy server that is running as a container in my host machine. So lastly, right over here, I've got the volume section that I'm mapping the ./caddy file right next to my Docker Compose file to this exact same path inside the container, which is exactly the same path that the Caddy will try to look for in order to initially configure itself when it's coming up. So lastly, right over here, I've got two directories that I'm trying to actually persist the /data and /config inside the Caddy's container, which are exactly the same directories that the Caddy will use to store its data and any configurations that it might be creating along with the process. So with having all this in mind, I'll move to the Caddy file. Right over here on the global section, I'm actually setting the automatic redirect from HTTP HTTP to HTTPS to off. So right over here, I'm actually telling the Caddy to listen to these two exact ports that I actually mapped on the Docker Compose file. Next, I'll move down. Right over here, I've got a handle block that is actually matching this exact pattern, which is /API/star. And right over here, I've got a reverse proxy directive that is actually proxying the requests to the address of the backend on port 80, which is exactly the same name that I gave to the echo server in my Docker Compose file. So because these two containers will be created by the same Docker Compose file, they will be actually attached to a shared network, and as a result, they will be able to see each other through their Docker Compose service names. So most likely for you, if your backend services is not attached to the exact same Docker network, or actually on another server with another IP address, you can actually replace this address with your backend services real addresses. Like for example, its IP and port, or if you have a local DNS server, you can actually put the local domain name of your backend services right over here. So inside this reverse proxy directive, I'm actually trying to do some different things. So I'll move to the README file right over here. So as you can see, we've got different headers that we can actually manipulate. So initially we've got some default headers that are set by the Caddy server, and in some use cases we might actually need to also manipulate those headers. And next we've got the client sent headers. Like for example, we want to actually harden the headers that we want our backend services to actually receive from the clients. So actually maybe we want to limit the name of the headers that will be only able to send to our backend services. So in this case, we'll be using the header up directive in the reverse proxy directive to actually add and remove some headers before the requests are being sent to our backend services. So I'll move back to the Caddy file right over here. And as you can see, by using the header up directive, I'm actually trying to add a header to the request that will be sent from my Caddy server to my backend server. So again, using the same directive, and by putting the minus sign right before the headers, I will be able to actually remove the headers that may be sent by the clients, and actually I don't want those headers to be received by my backend services. So using the exact same directive, we can actually ignore whatever the value of the headers that are being sent by our clients, and actually replace whatever their value is by our desired values, again before sending it to our backend services. So using the same logic for the header down directive, we can actually add some headers right before we send back the response to our clients, or actually remove some headers that we don't want to be included in the response that is being sent back to our clients. So I'll move to the terminal, I'll hit ls to make sure I'm in the exact same directory that I have my configuration files, and by saying docker compose up-d, I should be able to see both my containers are being created, attaching to a shared network, and also by saying docker compose ps, I should be able to see that both my containers are up and running with the exact same ports that I mapped in my Docker Compose file to the inside the containers. So I'll say docker compose logs -f to follow the logs, and --tails 100 to grab the latest 100 lines of the outputted logs of each of these containers. So I'll hit enter, and right over here I can see that things are looking good, and I should be able to make my requests to this Caddy server that will be proxying my requests to the echo server. So I'll move to another terminal, and by using curl, I should be able to make some requests and receive some responses from the Caddy server. So I'll provide the address of the machine that is holding my Caddy server. I'll say /API, and if I hit enter, I should be able to see some headers. So as I can see, I've got some headers that are being added by the Caddy server when the response is being sent back to the client. So as you can see, I've got the proxy added down header, which actually I've added right over here with this exact same value. So next right over here, this is the exact details of the request that is received by the echo server. And if I look through the headers right over here, we should be able to see the headers that are being added by our Caddy server, even if we don't actually add it when we try to make the requests. So I'll try to make another request again using curl. By setting the -h, I should be able to add some headers to the request that will be sent to my Caddy server. So as you can see right over here, I'm setting the client header to some value, and the client header persisted again to some defined value right over here. And if I hit enter, as you can see, the request that is being received by the echo server that is proxied behind the Caddy server. So as you can see, the Caddy server has changed the value of one of the headers that I set in my request, and that is because I'm actually setting the value of this exact header in my Caddy file to this new value right over here. So actually the echo server shouldn't be able to see this client header, and if we go back and check right over here, there is no client header being sent to the echo server proxy behind the Caddy server. So this is the steps that we can actually manipulate the headers before being sent to our backend services, and also the headers of the responses before being sent back to the clients. So lastly, right over here, you can see we've got some predefined headers that are being set by default by our Caddy server. And like for example, the server header, for many reasons, we might actually try to change this value or actually remove this header because maybe we don't want the client to know what reverse proxy tool that we're actually using. So if you remember, as I mentioned, we can actually use the header directive to manipulate the request and responses headers apart from the reverse proxy directive. So I'll move back to the other terminal right over here. I'll hit Ctrl+C and try to nano my Caddy file and actually remove this comment right over here. And as you can see, by using the header directive inside the handle path directive for all the requests that will be sent to the /API, I'm actually trying to change the server header with my whatever value that I desire to be included in the responses that will be sent back to my clients. So I'll try to save this file and exit out of the nano, and by saying docker compose down and docker compose up -d again, so my currently running container will be destroyed and a new Caddy server with new configuration file will be up and running. So if I go back to the other terminal right over here, and I'll try to make another request, and as you can see, the server's value, which is some headers that are being added by Caddy server by default, I'm actually able to change the value of this header also. So that's all for this video. I hope you'll learn something new in this one. If you haven't watched the previous videos where you can learn about some basics of the reverse proxies and a lot of cool features that comes out of the box by the Caddy's container. So if you haven't watched, I recommend you give a visit, and you can find the relevant link for the playlist down in the description section also. So if you found the video useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe to help grow the channel and motivate me to create more free contents like this. And with that, that's all for this video, and I hope to see you in the next videos.